Hello, everybody, and welcome to Loremaster Investigations, where we muse upon the tabletop role playing game genre and talk about the many ins and outs in our floating castle in the sky. I'm Cody.
And I'm Joe. And Calliope is my muse, but I know that that's not the right one. Cleo. Cleo is the muse of history. She's my muse.
Ah,
So, hey, how have you been,
nice.
Cody?
I have been well, all things considered.
Fair
How
enough.
about yourself?
I too have been well, all things considered.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's like the through line, I feel like, of
sure.
2020
I feel
is like you do what you can, but like obviously there's like the internal like that scene in SpongeBob where like all the SpongeBobs are running around, everything's on fire,
yeah.
and but you're like, yeah, everything's fine.
I feel that it's finding weird little things that you never thought would entertain you start really weirdly entertaining you, like watching wrestlers play Uno.
Huh.
Yeah.
What a wild concept.
Yes, exactly, 100%. That's why I brought it up. Or watching
Nice.
Among Us compilation videos. Where I'm
Oh, dude. I want to play Among Us, but I don't have like a dedicated crew like that to be like,
Yeah,
yo, I think you kind of sus
I
though.
feel like you kind of
Where we're
sus.
Yeah, I like the memes though. I've been watching a lot of those videos too. A
Yeah.
lot of those deception games are really fun.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, oh my gosh,
Oh
Cody,
yeah,
it's so chilly up here in this castle in the
I
sky.
know now that it's getting to the
The
the cold season.
the
Like I
seasons
have
are
like a full
changing.
on yeah. The seasons are changing, and I'm in a full uh dragon fur set.
Okay, what kind of dragon has fur? Out of curiosity.
The ones with fur.
Yeah, which ones are those? Yeah.
The midnight Norwegian
Oh,
dragons
fair enough.
of
Aren't
yeah,
aren't
yeah, yeah.
aren't blue dragons a little furry because they live in cold climates, or
You know,
am I
art
going
would
crazy?
suggest probably not,
Fair enough.
although to be fair, fantasy is what you make it. So
That's
like if you
true.
want to have dragons with fur, go ahead. That would be rad. I'd love to see like dragons with like, like now I'm just thinking of like chimeras and shit, but
And
yeah,
then and
that's
then the people who grew up watching Dragrassic Park are gonna get really mad at the idea
yeah.
because it's like my dragons had scales the way Steven Spielberg made them have scales.
Yeah, and then they're gonna make a movie like 20 years down the road and try to like like horseshoe an explanation in and be like, well, that was the only way to make Dragassic Park scary, and
Yep.
yep.
Boy what a movie, huh?
Man, that movie, my favorite part, and I feel like it's like my mood for 2020 is when everything is going fucking bananas, and there's just fucking
Jimmy Buffett?
who was it? Jimmy Buffett with the
Yeah.
two margaritas running. Yeah, like that's me. I'm just running with two margaritas trying to make it.
Oh man, did you see who perked up at the mention of 2 margaritas? Bookie,
Oh,
it's
Bookie.
Bookie's friend,
Oh,
Chickeny the Scroll, which is why
wow.
it
So
sounded
we
more
have a
like a
magic
chicken.
scroll
Yeah.
that has like a chicken-like persona, huh? You always find these crazy things down at the fantasy market. Like,
That is true.
I mean, that's where Bookie came from.
That's what I bring. And oh boy, he jumped up on my or it jumped up on my lap, and I'm scritching
I'm
the
now
back of the
imagining
neck,
like,
and oh, it unfolded, it unraveled.
wow.
Oh, I shall read this. It
I
says
thought this was a family-friendly station.
it is. Yeah, it is. Scrolls
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
unravel. It's fine. Hey,
Yeah, it's
hey, lore
fine.
masters. Uh, I was wondering, when developing a Dungeons and Dragons setting, how much technology do you add and why? And how far is too far?
Oh.
Oh, interesting. Well, mm,
Nice. What was Scroll's the scroll
I
character's name
believe
again?
it's Scrolly the scroll.
Scrolly, booky, scrolly. Okay, I mean it's on brand. Yeah. So thank you, Scrolly, for
Yeah.
that.
So yeah, I mean, hey, like we are kind of like living in an age where like fantasy and sci-fi are some becoming somewhat closer and like more boon companions. Would you agree with that idea, Cody?
Yeah, I think we're at a point now where we've kind of done a lot of different things already. So
Mhm.
fantasy is really just kind of the wild west right now, where you just kind of do whatever you want. You know, like
Sure.
uh, if you want, bipedal cats with laser wrist gauntlets shooting magic with their eyes, like by all means.
How did you get that build of Kajat in Skyrim?
Well, yeah, I was on the Skyrim modding community, and it
Yeah,
was one of those ones that's like deeply buried in there, and
fair enough. But
has
yeah,
like 20,000 warnings that it doesn't work with anything else. But I'm like, fuck that, and I'm gonna be mad later when it doesn't work.
so yeah. But yeah, I mean, I would argue that there's always kind of existed shades of gray when it comes to this, and there are some out there who kind of just balk at the idea of like having science fiction elements into your fantasy world. But I would argue that the mere fact that like they're taking place on worlds that aren't our own is like
Uh-huh.
at least a little sci-fi, like in general, if you think about it.
Sure.
Um, and so, I think like the important thing in my mind, we'll get into a little bit, is it's a balancing act. So I'm going to start off by asking you a question, Cody.
Yeah.
As a DM, if you're adding technology to the table, what is your ratio of magic versus science versus a combo of the two?
Magic versus technology or
Yeah, I would say
science,
like pure like science tech. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, well, honestly, um so here's the thing about that, right? I'm kind of on the mentality that, you know, um technology and magic could theoretically exist together. Just because magic is kind of weird and, quote unquote unexplainable. You have wizards that are basically like these big giant magic nerds, as much as we have, physicists and things that
sure,
are like, tackling those same dilemmas just from a different angle. So, I mean, I would say there really isn't a ratio that I wouldn't tackle.
got it.
That's not to say that, I mean, so here's the thing. I guess that's more along the lines of like, I guess what do I like, where's the line between how much technology is too much before it doesn't feel like fantasy anymore?
Sure,
And honestly, if I was being honest with you, I it doesn't really matter to me. Like I could have like a heavily invested science fiction game where everyone is like 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 spacefaring, civilizations that live in giant like capital ships. But like if there's a little bit of magic and like you have like cool and interesting like selections of species that exist within the cosmos, like that's enough fantasy for me. But I've also done games where it's like there's no technology whatsoever and it's really just kind of flavor of the week for me. I know right now I'm doing our current campaign. I have introduced the idea that like technology does exist, and there are people who are along with wizards who are learning about the cosmos from that spectrum. There are scientists who are trying to develop things because there's this kind of culture and class clash of like, if you're a wizard in this society that I've developed, you're already a leg up from most people, so you often are, within a higher social status, and they gawk at technology. But technology is kind of becoming, at least from like a general idea, it's kind of becoming like this is the magic for people who don't have, these ridiculous like pedigrees of magic and whatnot. So like, it really depends. I know I tend to not go too far with magic, or otherwise I would just do a sci-fi setting.
Mhm.
Or I take that back, or rephrase that. I don't go too far with technology. I don't like. I feel like as long as I'm on the same plane and like there's no space travel, we're still in fantasy. You know, majority.
Cool.
You know,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
I think once you start to get to that point, at least in my eyes, in my opinion, it's more of like here's a sci-fi game with some fantasy elements sprinkled in.
Sounds good, yeah. I
Yeah. So my question for you is, what is your cutoff for technology in a fantasy game, and why? What is that cutoff before it's like, hey, now wait a minute, this isn't fantasy?
I don't necessarily know if I have a strong cutoff.
Sure,
More so, I feel like I want to know, like, I'm okay with it if there have been pre-established rules or like a logical progression chain to the thing that we have, if that makes
sure,
sense, right? So, I feel like for a lot of people it is like interstellar travel. Um and
yeah,
and so I will say, like, if we have, if there is a laser cannon without first inventing like the gun, you know?
sure. That might
Um
feel weird and disjointed.
yeah, exactly. But like if we have already established like sort of a timeline of technology, I'm pretty forgiving, if it's like there is precedent in the world that this thing could exist. Because, in our own technology, there's a certain like level of progression. Like we wouldn't necessarily have smartphones if it weren't for those gigantic computers that would take up like 3 rooms to do like simple computing, you know?
Right, right.
And so like if I was in a world and like everyone was like kind of just walking around with like, a smartphone in their pocket, but there wasn't tower computers or anything like that, like I would get a little suspect because hey, like this thing like, this is a smaller version of this bigger thing. Like, technology follows this logical chain as I've kind of said. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's my big thing is, so long as it follows like a logical progression, then I am
Okay.
okay with it. So,
Follow-up question then
yeah, hit me.
before mild. So from what I'm gathering, as long as it makes sense in the narrative, it doesn't matter how much or where that line is. So my question is, what if you were in a fantasy game and suddenly you were in some kind of ancient ruin and you found technology that doesn't match?
Ooh, interesting.
So
Um,
like, yeah, what if you were in some weird temple and then you just happened upon a laser gun, like, and you have no idea why it's there and nobody has an answer for you, but it's there and it
sure.
shoots a laser beam. Is that cool?
I feel like my gut instinct is to say yes if when explored, it has a payoff.
Yeah, like it's got some kind of fictional connection to it. It's not just like, guys, we're getting on Helm's Deep. Why is Gandalf riding a B-52 bomber and just absolutely destroying these orcs for no reason?
Yeah,
You
like
know?
yeah, like if you were like planting the seed that like perhaps there was like ancient aliens who the world conceives as gods or whatever,
Sure.
um, then I think I would be more okay with it for sure. Simply
Okay.
because like if you just kind of were just like, here's a laser gun, go off and explore, like, and I was like, well, what's the origin of this laser gun? And you're like, it shoots lasers. Like that's when I would be like, I think Cody just wanted to add some wanton destruction to his game. I don't
What?
get where
No,
this.
you know me. I would write in that wanton destruction if I really wanted it.
I mean, fair enough. But yeah, I feel like there's ways of seeding more advanced technology in interesting ways. Um,
Right, right.
so long as there it feels like it's going somewhere. And even if it's like an aborted arc or whatever, because the party's just like, I don't really give two shits if like
Yeah,
there
it's
are
a
ancient
laser cannon. Pew
aliens.
pew.
Um just like, the fact that there is a that is a, breadcrumb for like maybe another adventure or something like that would make
Sure.
me okay with it. So, all right, my next
Cool.
question for you.
Yeah, hit
So,
me.
what's your favorite piece of technology that you've added to a D&D game?
Well, right now we added the six-shooter revolver, which has been a very fun arc so far that you've had to deal with.
That's
Um,
true.
in terms of my favorite, um, I have some ideas for stuff that is going to become apparent in the future of that campaign, which is a mixture of magic and technology that will become very uh will become a very important piece of the city that you live in. It's based for people who don't know. I'm running a campaign that kind of mirrors the design style of like a Final Fantasy VII, where like they're in this big super city with like different sectors and things like that. And I have created a um kind of like a quote unquote unlimited energy machine that the party will eventually stumble upon
Mm,
that will be interesting to see what they do with it, because so far the party's kind of gotten into a lot of like conspiracies and trying to figure out who's really the bad guy in the city. Is it the people that
sure.
they work for, or the people they're fighting against,
Or both.
or both? Yeah, maybe there isn't an easy answer to that.
Sure.
So um
I have an answer as well.
yeah,
You introduced a time machine, and that was pretty wild.
I did introduce a time machine. Man, it's been a long time since I introduced that.
Well, clearly it was
um
memorable because it stuck with me.
Yeah, I like that one too. I mean, that's the thing about especially technology in a world that doesn't have technology. Almost everything like I could think of all of the different things that I've added and be like, "Oh, that was really cool in that moment." Because like, who would expect a time machine in like a fantasy game, or who would expect that? People who are fighting goblins in caves, all of a sudden the goblins show up with like six-shooter revolvers and just start blasting you in the face. Like,
Sure.
who would have seen that? Like, though, like technology can be really interesting in that way, where it's like it's a huge stark contrast to like the sword and sorcery that you get pretty regularly in at least the usual quote unquote styles of games that I've ever seen or played in.
Yeah.
If you could invent something to revolutionize a fantasy world, what would it be?
Oh boy. Um. So I feel like there are some things that like my mind kind of jumps to that D&D already kind of has.
Sure.
But I feel like the big thing is like, and I guess it depends on how crunchy your game slash your DM table is, where it's just like um creating an automobile sort of deal, you know,
Okay.
of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um a thing to make travel easier and a little bit more convenient. And I know that I've listened to like actual plays where you have things that make make it things like that. I don't know. I just I love the idea. I like car chases. In fact,
Yeah,
in our
I mean,
one
who
game
doesn't love a good, like, pulpy car chase where people are, like, leaning out the windows and taking pot shots at each other? Like, yeah, it's dope.
in
I
fact,
get it.
we had a great moment where, my character and another character invented, like, NASCAR, but with, like, wagons, or, like, push
Yeah.
wagons. Like
Yep, yep. Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, you guys, like, made this, like, big event out of push wagons and turned it into this, like, big racing scene in the city.
but yeah, I feel like that's sort of where my mind goes to is like, an easier, faster, more convenient way to travel. How about you? What would you add to a game to, like, a technology you could add to a game to fundamentally change it?
I would gosh, I mean, there's a ton of them, that I think of, like, all the time. Like, just, like, I look at modern day and I think, how cool would it be if somehow in a fantasy world they created, like, some form of the internet where that, like, data or just, like, everyone's memory, like, can end up in some, like, big ethereal cosmic space, and you just kind of, like, jack in and you can, like, interact with the various people who are also jacked in, and you can, like, and, like, do that almost shadow runner style thing where, like, there are elite groups of people who, like, can navigate this place and, like, steal data from people and whatnot, and, like, do, like, do that whole thing. Like, I would love to do that where it's like, oh yeah, by the way, have you been on the net lately? And you're like, what? It's like, yeah, hold on, and you can, like, get all your information or talk, like, chat with people across the globe on this, like, ethereal network that's just cascading over the whatever fantasy world you're on. That would be dope.
That I think that would be. Yeah, I mean, a thing that I like to do sometimes, like the thought experiment that I like to sometimes create in my brain is, like, there's steampunk, right?
Right,
Where
right.
I like to think of, like, magic punk, which is like, what would like a film noir movie look like in Minas Tirith, in, like, the Lord of the Rings, right? And it's like, because having magic means that sometimes, there's a sense of logic that technology might not progress the way that it would in our world, right?
Right, like, it almost doesn't, like, especially with the way magic is often used, it doesn't make sense to evolve into using firearms when most people can just use wands or, like, cast a blasting spell like that, you know what I mean?
For sure.
Like, or, like, there it would be such a niche thing that, like, only, like, some crazy cult or something uses them because they forbid magic or something. Like, and
And
that, yeah, it makes you wonder, like, what other things like firearms wouldn't people build? Like electricity.
sure.
Like, that would have, like, if you have access to lightning magic, or, like, being able to call forth lightning at will, like, what does that look like? Like, power plants all of a sudden are very different. They'd almost be like conductors, or, like, big, like, magical, like, tuning rods where, like, lightning just keeps shooting into them, and, like, that power is being put somewhere else or something.
But yeah, I mean, that's always sort of where I come from with like technology in your setting is sort of this idea of, I sometimes think about how, it's like it's an easy way to, like, make a culture feel distinct. Um so, like, I know in your world, like, the gnomes, even though they're magical, were more like interested in creating inventions and things like that, things that might start looking a little bit closer to technology that we are used to, but maybe, as you said, like, the engine is powered differently. Like, they're not using gasoline; they're using, um, like, spheres that, like, you can imbue with your magical essence for, like, a little bit. Maybe
Right.
maybe they don't go as far, or maybe they don't. Maybe you have to pull over a few more oftentimes on your, like, trip or whatever. But um it's just this idea of there's something so fascinating to me in like thinking through the whole like timeline of the thing.
Right.
Because I feel like one of the reasons why so many people like to go back to like sword and sorcery is it's relatively simplistic, right?
Oh yeah. I mean the yeah, everything is more simplistic. The needs, the wants, for most people in sword and sorcery, it's just being able to live to the next day.
Yeah, but and so the idea of like, well, let's think about like what would like a Renaissance fantasy world look like? What would a film noir, you know, like Renaissance or like fantasy world look like? Where like, and I feel like a bad example of this is, did you ever see the movie Bright?
I did see the movie Bright
I
with Mr. Smith.
Yes, with Mr. Smith and Mr. Edgerton. It was a movie that I didn't particularly care for, and I think a big part of it is just the fact that like, these elves and orcs and centaurs and things have been around for like presumably at least one like a couple of generations, and yet the world feels so similar to ours. Where it's like, wouldn't you think that like if like latently magical things just kind of like opened up portals in like a major American city that like the timeline would just radically shift?
Yeah, it definitely is one of those things where I one of the big complaints that I had with that movie, other than the fact that its story was,
Yeah,
very
it's
basic.
kind
It
of
was a
bad.
very basic, yeah, like was the fact that it really did just feel like, hey, let's take an American city and slap some orcs in there. Boom, you're done. And it's like, well, like, could you have done anything remotely like, interesting with that besides just like, all right, here's some orcs.
Yeah.
There's an elf. There you go.
Well, and so that's something that I find so exciting about building, a table, a world like whole cloth and things like that, because it allows you to like ask these questions, and you're not trying to fit it into a predetermined city like LA or something like that, but it also gives you the chance to play around with like, what does a world look like with dot dot dot. So I know that there are people out there who get pretty hung up on this idea, but as far as I'm concerned, technology in your D&D setting, it's fine with me so long as you follow a logical pathway. Any closing statement from you, Mr. Cody?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's your game. Use it how you need it. But for me, I'm pretty open about what you introduce into a game. Like if you're in a fantasy world and you want to have like cool airships or like cyber cities or whatever, like that's all cool by me. Yeah, I guess to the same idea of you is like, as long as it's like, that's the city, not like this weird like, oh, by the way, here's an airship, and you're like, wait, why do we have an airship? And it's just like, all right, let's go. And it's like, okay, like, yeah, like, I want, if you're gonna add technology, like, make it a part of the world, make that interesting, because like
Yeah,
that stuff is really cool. And when you get to, well, like when you play a game or you're in a game where like somebody's just like, oh yeah, there's cars, and you're like, oh cool, how did they get that? And it's just like, well, just fuck off and drive your car. And
yeah,
it's like, oh okay, yeah, it just feels like, it's like, damn, there's so much opportunity here and it's squandered.
yeah.
But
At the very least, have a story ready.
right, but it's I'm down. I'm pretty loosey goosey on that stuff. I'll do basically whatever.
Yeah, and like that. Oh, did you see that? Scrolly is now pecking at my hand, looking for some corn
Okay.
kernels. Bark, 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 bark. So another one in the book slash scroll, depending on which animal noise Joe wants to meet next week.
Well, don't worry. We'll macrame them together into some horrible concoction chimera monster.
Bookie just looked at you with so much like tiredness in its eyes.
I
It's like,
know. I
why,
know Bookie is tired with me, but you know what?
why, Papa, why?
Why have you done this?
But anyway, hey Cody,
Yeah.
if if people, hey Cody, if people liked what, hey Cody, if people liked what they heard in this episode and they want to learn more, where's a place where they can get some more information about us?
They can go to our website at www.fandomroulette.com where you can find all of our episodes as they're going up, all of our schedules for the things we're doing, and all of our social media stuff at the bottom. And if you want to send us like information about like what you'd be interested in or what have you, or just want to chat,
Yeah.
there is a form at the bottom of the thing. Just got to fill like a handle, doesn't have to be your real name, don't need to know that. And whatever you want to talk about, whether it's this show or one of the various other shows we're doing, we'd love to hear from you. And that would be great for us to know what you guys are interested in.
Faux show. Hey Cody, if someone wants to introduce a friend to this, but they don't necessarily use the same podcast app as they do, what are some places where they can find episodes of our show?
Man, we are all over this world wide web. We're on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, basically all of your RSS pod catching apps. All you got to do is search Fandom Roulette.
And hey Cody, if someone wants to drop us a funny meme or let us know what they thought of an episode or something, not necessarily wanting to write us a whole novella, where's some social media places that they can, check in, follow us, or engage in the conversation?
We're on Twitter at fandomr_podcast. So if that is your preferred social media platform, we are there if you want to chat. And also, we're on Facebook and Instagram. All you got to do is search Fandom Roulette.
Also, please remember to like, rate, review, and subscribe. Ring the bell, leave a comment, tell a friend. All of that
All
will,
this stuff
yes,
helps the channel.
for sure, and it helps us to grow, and it helps us to make some more fun stuff like the very show you're listening to. We know that you have a lot of choices in what kind of thing you spend your time listening to or watching or things like that, and we want to thank you for spending a little bit of your busy life with us.
Thank you.
So, signing off for Phantom Roulette, this is Joe,
And I'm Cody.
and as always, stay nerdy.
Stay super nerdy.